the eyes that bind. The moon cast a pale glow over the abandoned asylum, its crumbling facade looming ominously in the night. Ivy tendrils snaked their way up the cracked walls, giving the place an eerie, haunted appearance. It was here, in this desolate building, that our story begins. Jane, a young woman in her late 20s, awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to rub the sleep from her eyes, only to realize that something was horribly wrong. Panic surged through her body as her hands frantically explored her face. Her eyes were gone. She was blind. Fear gripped her like a vice as she stumbled out of bed, her hands outstretched to feel her way in the darkness. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend how she had ended up in this forsaken place and what had happened to her eyes. The last thing she remembered was going to bed in her cozy apartment, not far from the asylum. Determined to find answers, Jane cautiously made her way through the asylum, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet. The air was thick with a musty odor, a haunting reminder of the building's past. Cobwebs brushed against her face, making her shudder. As she explored the asylum's labyrinthine corridors, Jane's senses heightened. Every sound echoed in her ears, magnified by her loss of sight. She could hear faint whispers and distant footsteps, as if the building itself was alive. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow and quick. Suddenly, a voice pierced the silence, causing Jane to freeze in her tracks. "Find me," it whispered, sending chills down her spine. The voice sounded distant yet eerily close, as if it came from within her own mind. The words echoed through the corridor, growing louder and more insistent. Driven by an unexplainable force, Jane followed the voice, her fingertips grazing the decaying walls for guidance. It led her deeper into the asylum, past rusted metal doors and broken windows. Each step filled her with dread, as if she was venturing further into the abyss. After what seemed like an eternity, Jane reached a room bathed in a sickly yellow light. The air felt heavy with anticipation. She hesitated at the threshold, her heart pounding in her ears. The voice, now a haunting melody, drew her inside. In the center of the room stood a man, his back turned to her. He wore a tattered suit, his unkempt hair falling in greasy strands. Jane felt a strange mix of terror and familiarity. Something about him resonated deep within her. "Who are you? What happened to my eyes?" Jane's voice trembled with a mixture of fear and desperation. The man turned slowly, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. "You're trapped in my realm now," he hissed, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "And your eyes are the price you must pay." Confusion and terror swirled inside Jane's mind. How did she end up in this twisted nightmare? And what did this man want from her? The man continued, his voice dripping with malice. "You see, I feed on fear. I've been watching you for some time, Jane. Your fears, your vulnerabilities, they nourish me. But to truly satisfy my appetite, I need something more. I need your eyes." Jane's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing for a way out. She had to escape this monstrous creature's clutches and find a way to reclaim her sight. But the room seemed to tighten around her, as if the walls themselves were closing in. As the man advanced towards her, a sudden realization struck Jane. The asylum, the man, her blindness, it was all a manifestation of her deepest fears, brought to life by her own mind. She had always struggled with anxiety and had a deep-seated fear of losing control. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jane mustered a defiant resolve. She refused to be consumed by her own fears. With a surge of determination, she darted towards the man, her hands outstretched to claw at his eyes. In that moment, the room erupted in chaos. Shadows twisted and writhed, their eerie whispers growing louder. The man screamed in agony as Jane's nails found their mark. Darkness enveloped her as her own fears threatened to consume her. But just as all seemed lost, a glimmer of hope emerged. Jane felt a surge of energy, a flicker of light within the darkness. It grew brighter, pushing back the suffocating fear. Slowly her vision returned, her eyes restored. With her newfound sight, Jane saw through the illusions that had held her captive. The asylum crumbled away, revealing her familiar surroundings. The man, once powerful and menacing, now appeared frail and defeated. "You can't defeat me," he snarled, his voice trembling with rage. But Jane stood tall, her eyes blazing with determination. "I may have fears, but I will not be controlled by them," she declared. "This nightmare ends here." With a final surge of strength, Jane banished the man and his twisted row. The asylum faded into nothingness, leaving behind only the memories of her harrowing ordeal. As Jane stepped back into the real world, her heart was lighter. She had faced her fears head-on and emerged stronger for it. And though her past struggles would never fully disappear, she knew she had the power to conquer them. And so, Jane left the abandoned asylum behind, her eyes wide open to the world. The moon's pale glow watched over her as she walked away, her steps filled with a newfound resilience. She had survived the horrors of her own mind and emerged victorious, a testament to the indomitable spirit that resides within us all. Greedy, greedy. The small town of Willowbrook was nestled deep within the misty woods, its quaint cottages and cobbled streets exuding an air of enchantment. The townsfolk, though seemingly ordinary, held a secret closely guarded within the confines of a town bank. It was said that the bank was the repository of the riches belonging to a coven of powerful witches, whose magic infused the very fabric of the town. Among the inhabitants of Willowbrook, there was one individual whose motivations were far from pure. Jack Hawthorne, a notorious bank robber with a knack for cunning, had heard whispers of a witch's wealth and couldn't resist the allure. He devised a plan to infiltrate the bank, steal the treasures, and make his escape before the townsfolk realized what had befallen them. On a chilly moonlit night, Jack crept through the winding alleyways, his footsteps muffled by the fallen leaves. He wore a black mask that concealed his face, ensuring his anonymity. The town bank stood before him, a sturdy stone building with an air of impregnability. But Jack's confidence knew no bounds. He believed himself to be invincible. Within the bank, Beatrice Finch, the manager, was preparing for a restless night. She was a kind-hearted woman with graying hair and a wise glint in her eyes. Beatrice was aware of the dangers that lurked outside the bank's walls, aware that the witch's riches could be a magnet for trouble. She resolved to protect the treasures with her life, should the need arise. Meanwhile, at the edge of the woods, a young witch named Alara sensed a disturbance in the magical equilibrium. Her long auburn hair flowed like flames in the night, and her emerald eyes burned with determination. Alara had an uncanny connection to the enchanted artifacts held within the bank, and she vowed to defend her coven's legacy at all costs. As Jack approached the entrance of the bank, he felt a shiver run down his spine. The air grew dense with an otherworldly presence, and a soft whispering seemed to emanate from the shadows. Undeterred, he picked the lock on the front door with skillful precision and slipped inside. The bank's interior was dimly lit, the moon's pale glow casting eerie shadows across the room. Jack's eyes gleamed with greed as he surveyed the treasures displayed within glass cases. Ancient spellbooks, enchanted jewels, and potent potions were arranged meticulously, each item more enticing than the last. Unbeknownst to Jack, Beatrice had been alerted to his presence by the bank's magical security system. She had always been prepared for this day, training tirelessly to harness the dormant powers within her. She approached the bank's vault, the heavy iron door guarding the witch's riches, and chanted an incantation. The door shuddered, responding to the magic that coursed through her veins. As Jack reached out to grab a handful of jewels, a piercing shriek echoed through the air, freezing him in place. The shelves rattled, and the glass cases vibrated violently. Alara had arrived, her magical aura swirling around her like a tempest. She confronted Jack, her voice laced with warning. "Thief, you have trespassed upon sacred ground," Alara said, her voice carrying a mix of authority and concern. "These treasures are not meant for mortal hands. I implore you, leave now, before the witch's magic unleashes its wrath upon you." Jack, however, laughed derisively. "Magic. Fairy tales and children's fantasies," he scoffed. "I've faced danger far worse than your tricks, witch. I'll be leaving with the riches, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." Undeterred by Jack's arrogance, Alara summoned her powers. A swirling vortex of wind materialized around her, lifting her off the ground. She unleashed a torrent of energy, sending objects hurtling toward Jack with lightning speed. The air crackled with electricity, creating a maze of peril that Jack struggled to navigate. Beatrice, observing the chaos unfold, knew that she needed to take action. She focused her energy on the bank's security system, redirecting its magic to immobilize Jack further. The room shimmered with an ethereal glow as invisible restraints held him firmly in place. Jack's bravado began to waver, his eyes widening with fear. "Release me," he shouted, his voice laced with desperation. "I won't let you witches hold me captive." Alara approached Jack, her eyes glowing with a mixture of sympathy and resolve. "We seek not to harm you, but to protect that which is sacred," she explained, her voice tinged with sorrow. "The magic within these artifacts is too powerful for mortals to comprehend. It can grant great boons or unleash unimaginable chaos. We cannot allow it to fall into the wrong hands." Jack's eyes darted around the room, searching for a way to escape. However, every exit was blocked by swirling mists or arcane barriers. He was trapped, his dreams of untold wealth crumbling before him. The tension in the room hung heavy as the fate of the bank, the witches, and Jack intertwined in a precarious dance. Just as all seemed lost for the ill-fated thief, a glimmer of remorse flickered in Alara's eyes. She had witnessed the desperation and greed that had driven Jack to this point. With a flick of her wrist, she lifted the magical restraints that bound him, allowing him to stand free. "Go," Alara said, her voice filled with a bittersweet kindness. "Return to your life, thief, and remember what you have witnessed here. The magic of Willowbrook is a gift that should be cherished, not stolen. Find solace in what you have, rather than obsessing over what you desire." Jack, bewildered and humbled by his encounter with the witches, stumbled toward the door. As he crossed the threshold, the enchantment surrounding the bank faded, leaving him in the quiet embrace of the night. The town of Willowbrook seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting to see how the tale would unfold. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, but Jack Hawthorne never forgot the encounter with the witches of Willowbrook. He abandoned his life of crime, seeking redemption and purpose. The treasures that once consumed his thoughts now served as a reminder of the choices he had made. Willowbrook, forever under the watchful eye of the witches, continued to thrive. Its inhabitants reveled in the magic that coursed through their veins, using it to bring joy and harmony to the town. The bank, though no longer just a repository of wealth, became a symbol of resilience and wisdom. And so, the tale of the bank robber who stole from the small-town bank that held the riches of witches remained etched in the memories of those who witnessed it. It served as a reminder that even in the most whimsical of places, darkness and greed can be overcome by the power of unity and the magic of redemption. Amelia. The dilapidated city streets were a desolate wasteland, with towering buildings cast in shadows that seemed to swallow the sunlight whole. It was a place forgotten by time, where desperation lingered in the air like a foul stench. Among the forgotten souls that called these streets home, there was a homeless man named Samuel, a once proud man reduced to rags and filth. Samuel had fallen on hard times, his life unraveled by circumstances beyond his control. A promising career, a loving family, and a warm home were distant memories now, replaced by the bitter reality of survival on the unforgiving streets. His hollow eyes held a glimmer of hope, a flicker that refused to be extinguished. He clung to life, pushing through each day with sheer determination. But as night fell upon the desolate city, Samuel's existence transformed into a living nightmare. He became the prey of faceless beings that haunted his every step. These ethereal specters moved with silent whispers, their presence like a weighty darkness that sent chills down Samuel's spine. They were tall and elongated, their bodies distorted and shapeless, as if torn from a nightmarish realm. Their motives remained shrouded in mystery, their intentions veiled by the inky blackness that surrounded them. Samuel could feel their eyes upon him, burning with an otherworldly hunger. Their relentless pursuit fueled his paranoia, driving him deeper into the labyrinthine streets, seeking refuge from an enemy he could not comprehend. Each night, as Samuel huddled in his makeshift shelter, the symphony of fear played its haunting melody in his mind. The wind whispered secrets he could not decipher, rustling the refuse that littered the streets like the echoes of forgotten souls. Every creak of a distant door or distant footsteps sent his heart racing, his senses heightened to the point of agony. The faceless beings were elusive, darting in and out of shadows, their movements synchronized with Samuel's own. They seemed to anticipate his every move, lurking just out of sight, leaving only traces of their presence. An icy breath on the nape of his neck, an ephemeral touch that grazed his cheek, and the faint echoes of their whispered torment. With each passing night, Samuel's desperation grew. He had become a prisoner of his own fear, a hunted animal cornered by an invisible predator. He began to question his sanity, the boundaries between reality and the supernatural blurring like smudged ink on parchment. He knew he needed answers, a way to break free from this terrifying cycle. Driven by his need to survive, Samuel embarked on a perilous journey into the underbelly of the city, seeking the enigmatic doctor. Amelia Bishop, a renowned parapsychologist rumored to possess knowledge of the supernatural. Through the tangled web of urban decay, Samuel navigated the treacherous labyrinth, fueled by a mix of determination and madness. The obstacles he faced were as daunting as the faceless beings themselves. The city was a maze, its streets twisting and turning, leading Samuel into dead ends and danger at every turn. The deranged denizens of this forsaken place, those lost souls that had succumbed to madness, regarded him with suspicion and hostility. Their haunted eyes stared into his soul, as if reflecting his own descent into darkness. Dr. Bishop emerged from the shadows, a woman of distinguished grace and intellect. Her eyes held a deep well of wisdom, as if she had witnessed the birth and death of countless mysteries. Samuel relayed his harrowing experiences, the relentless pursuit of the faceless beings that had driven him to the brink of madness. The parapsychologist listened intently, her gaze unwavering. With a gentle touch, she urged Samuel to sit and poured him a steaming cup of tea. The fragrant steam curled around his senses, momentarily soothing his weary soul. She spoke with a voice that carried the weight of centuries, her words painting a tapestry of forgotten lore. "These faceless beings, Samuel, are not of this realm," she began, her voice tinged with a mixture of caution and resolve. "They are phantoms of the ethereal plane, drawn to those whose spirits have been shattered, whose lives have been fractured by despair. They feed on the fragments of hope that remain within your soul." Samuel's eyes widened in both terror and understanding. The flicker of hope he had clung to had become a beacon, guiding these otherworldly entities to him like moths to a flame. He had unwittingly drawn them closer with his unyielding determination to survive. Dr. Bishop continued, her voice soft yet resolute. "But fear not, for there is a way to break free from their torment. You must face your darkest fears head-on, confront the shattered fragments of your soul, and reclaim the strength they have stolen from you." A glimmer of hope ignited within Samuel's heart. He had survived the relentless pursuit of the faceless beings, endured countless nights of terror. Now, armed with the knowledge bestowed upon him by Dr. Amelia Bishop, he was ready to face the shadows that lurked within. Nightfall arrived once more, and Samuel stood at the threshold of his makeshift shelter. The faceless beings emerged from the darkness, their presence oppressive yet tinged with a hint of trepidation. Samuel's heart pounded in his chest, but this time it was not fueled by fear alone. It was fueled by determination, by the resolve to confront his tormentors. With each step forward, Samuel's courage grew, a defiant flame that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. He locked eyes with the faceless beings, their gaze filled with hunger and confusion. He saw himself reflected in their abyssal voids, his own broken spirit laid bare. In that moment, Samuel understood the true nature of his tormentors. They were not his enemies but manifestations of his own fears, a mirror that reflected the shattered fragments of his soul. And with that realization, the faceless beings began to waver, their forms dissipating like smoke in the wind. Samuel stood alone in the empty streets, the cityscape no longer a desolate wasteland, but a canvas for the rebuilding of his fractured existence. The faceless beings were vanquished, their ethereal whispers silenced. Samuel had faced the darkest depths of his soul and emerged stronger, a survivor in a world that had sought to devour him. As dawn broke over the city, a glimmer of hope painted the horizon, casting away the remnants of the night's horrors. Samuel, no longer a victim, set forth on a new path, armed with the knowledge that even in the face of unspeakable darkness, the human spirit could prevail. He would carry his harrowing tale with him, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a reminder that, even in the depths of despair, a flicker of hope could illuminate the darkest corners of the soul. Thank you for watching and sweet dreams.